Hey, so I just wanted to record going through the process of me fixing this bug because I think it's actually a pretty interesting one. This is regarding like kind of an infinite item glitch here. So this we have this golden chest here, and I need a key to open it, but I don't have one. But one thing that can also happen is that if you kind of like don't aim at it, but if you aim it like away like this and you hit it, of course we have a breakpoint. Let me kind of get that out of the way for the moment. I forgot to get rid of that. But if you swing your sword, what'll happen is it'll break it, and this is basically the current state of what happens. So you basically see here that now the chest is broken, and there's other issues like, for example, you can still technically unlock the chest in this kind of situation. Um, but yeah, so that's a different issue that we'll have to deal with. But really, right now, I'm just trying to fix the issue of the chest being able to do this, what I'm about to show you. So I can still obviously click on it to try to open it, but the problem is that now once you've done that, um, for whatever reason, if I swing again, it'll actually, well, there you go. So I think you can hear it sort of like if I do this again, you heard a sound, you heard like a box breaking sound. And so basically what's happening is we're somehow resetting the actual hitbox or whatever, right? Or something. Something is being reset, even though it shouldn't. And so that results in basically being able to get infinite planks. And essentially what's just happening is that the same code that executes when the box is broken is happening repeatedly, which to me says, okay, there isn't either some state is being reset that shouldn't be reset, or there isn't a state at all in that where there should be, right? So for example, we have like for this chest item, let me try to find it here in the hierarchy. Um, Here it is. So this is the exact object. So this is like all the different scripts associated with it. And we have the damage receiver here, which is a script that we use on various different things, essentially as a way to say, hey, this thing can receive damage. But it says nothing on the matter of like, hit boxes or anything like that, which, I mean, that could be another thing that could be improved upon this is supplying like hitbox data and stuff like that. But essentially, it just says, okay, uh, it basically acts on a basis of, other objects detecting its hitbox and then basically sending a message to the damage receiver saying, hey, I'm dealing damage to you. So you'll see what that is in a minute here. But I'm basically going to do some breakpoint debugging to actually get to the source here. So in this case, obviously, like me doing this and dropping the item, we only want that happening once and never again. So, but that logic is a part of the breakable object uh, script. You have damage receiver, there's the breakable object script, and there's also the treasure chest one, which I don't think is really the place of concern here. It's mostly just the breakable object and the damage receiver, because obviously this is the thing which facilitates the receiving of damage, which says, okay, if something can be dealt, damage can be dealt to something, it goes through here essentially. This thing does all the processing for it, the receiving and processing of it. But the breakable object in this case um, is where the problem is. So, because of course you're dropping the wood, and that wood being dropped is actually right here. So the information for the wood being dropped is here. So if we go into here, the actual code that's being executed is actually, well, it's in this case it's on broken, or at least it should be. In fact, I'm pretty sure you can actually see that. We also have interactor. Also, this is something as well. It's something that I was kind of paying attention to. And so the interactor is this other object that's a part of the chest, and it has scripts for when you interact with an object, right? And so it allows you to click on it in this kind of fashion. And so essentially, what happens is um, the this code try to open is going to execute when we do that. So I was basically looking in here and thinking like, okay, um, you know, what code happens when you click on try to open first of all, right? And so that, of course, well, it's try to open. So interactor, I don't see it here. Actually, I don't see it because it's not in here. It's just in the treasure chest. So it's actually a part of the treasure chest, which so it does have relevance, sort of, I suppose. But it's the try to open function, which this happens when you try to open the chest, but obviously it needs to have a key, right? And this will happen no matter what. Ideally, once it's broken, you don't want this to happen anymore once you've broken the chest. So that's one thing that we could do to fix the issue. But I ideally just want to see why exactly something is happening that shouldn't be happening, right? Like, obviously, like in this case, if I swing the sword, nothing happens. But if I click on this, it resets something. So in this state, it's already doing what you'd expect. It's not spawning. It's not spawning any more wood if I swing additional times. It's only after I interact with it again. All right. So something about interacting with it is breaking it. But with that being said, what I was wanted to check was basically like if you go to the broken object on broken, what I was originally checking was, okay, well, if an item breaks, it should technically an item should only break once, right? So if I do this and it breaks, it really shouldn't break again unless you're saying somewhere to change the state, which can be totally possible. It's just when does that happen, right? Ignore that effect. In fact, we'll just do that. I don't know if that did anything, but yeah. Anyway, so with that being said, I'm gonna set a breakpoint down for unbroken, and I already have the debugger running. So if I swing the sword, nothing happens. If I do this, you can see it hits the breakpoint. And this unbroken function again, there's nothing inside of it regarding like, if the broken state has already been set, and really maybe there should be. There should be some information here saying like, if the breakable object has already been broken, and I don't think there is, right? None whatsoever, right? But you can see, where is this code being called from? It's being called from after damage dealt, and so it's basically, this is where the damage receiver comes into play. So basically the damage receiver, when it's executing, will, and I'll show that part, but this is basically what I was talking about before. There's a function that is called, it's public, so, a weapon or something that is capable of dealing damage will basically look for the damage receiver component on an object that it detected a collider on and call this function and then do all this stuff. But one of the things that it does is it calls after damage dealt. All right, that's basically the last thing it does, right? So after damage has been dealt, we call this function down here, and it's basically this special case where we're basically saying like, okay, if the damage receiver object, the object that has a damage receiver, if it also has a breakable object, and the health is less than or equal to 0, meaning we're completely out of health, then we're going to call the unbroken function. Now, in this case, in reality, what we should be doing is also checking to see if the broken state is already been altered, right? And that's pretty much it. That's all that should be happening, right? Any behavior that happens when you break will also happen as well, but nothing more, nothing less, right? There should be some like additional state, I think, at least for the breakable object to state like, whether or not it's broken, right? It shouldn't just be that the health is 0, right? Because the health can be, I suppose the health can be 0, but like the thing is that if you swing the sword an additional time and the health is already 0, it's like, how do you know, right? I guess. So there's different things you can do, but I'll think through that here without droning off too much on this to try to keep this video short. But if we follow up this stack trace even further, so again, originally this is where I put my breakpoint. So this is, again, we were just hitting the box. Of course, if I were to just click continue and I swing the sword again, for whatever reason, this code is not happening. So it's not like there isn't like a check. Like, but basically, I was looking to see if there was a check in here that was happening, something different between those two instances. Is there something happening here that's different? And if I do this again, to hit the breakpoint again, it's like, okay, there's obviously nothing in here about like checking whether or not the box has been broken. So I said, well, okay, let's step up to the next level. What's the next level? Well, the next level is the damage receiver, right? And technically in the damage receiver, there is actually a flag for target destroyed, right? We do actually have that property, and it is indeed being used actually here, set target destroyed. Right there, in fact, is the property. The property is being used externally by area damage dealer, it looks like, but it's also used by the damage receiver internally. And it's being used to say, after the damage has been dealt, if the target has been destroyed, then disable the behavior and all. So it's for AI stuff, but it's literally just a function which sets the flag to true. It's a very basic thing. Almost seems kind of silly that it's a function call, but there you go. But with that being said, that's setting it to destroyed. So in reality, what you could also do is just add a check as well. That's one way that the issue could be fixed. But obviously, there's something going on that in reality, in one scenario, it works fine, but in another scenario, like when you interact with it again, the issue happens a second time. So that's what I want to fix. I want to fix the core of the issue. So if I continue to climb up in the stack trace, in the stack frame, stack ladder, whatever you want to call it. So again, here's the deal damage function. Obviously, there's not. This is just the basic deal damage function. It shouldn't have anything in terms of like, it's not checking like, is this like it really shouldn't be doing any checks in terms of like, has this thing been destroyed? Because certain things might receive damage, but then the concept of them being destroyed isn't really a thing, right? So technically, in reality, this target destroyed thing is not something that should be a property of the damage receiver, because its goal isn't to know whether or not it's been destroyed. Its goal is just to know if information, whether or not damage, it should receive damage or something like that or whatever. And so, that kind of goes back into like, this behavior tree stuff shouldn't be here. And like a lot of this code really shouldn't be here. If you read the comments, you can kind of see it's a lot of like mess. And so that just goes back to that. But anyway, so if we keep stepping up the stack frame from here, if we go to the next level, we have just a basic function which kind of wraps a lot of the logic for combat. So we have, say, in this case, when we do a melee attack, and so we're saying, okay, this is the thing that's doing the attacking, this is the target, and then what we're doing is we're getting all this information. We're saying, okay, the damage receiver, and does it have a hitbox and all this kind of stuff. So at this point, we are basically clearly trying to see if there's a valid hitbox or if there's a damage receiver and all this kind of stuff. And then if there is a damage receiver, then we deal damage, obviously, right? And we get here we're getting the damage receiver either by getting it this way or getting it this way, which I don't really, personally, I don't understand. Like, I understand what's going on here, but I'm like, I never really fully approved of this being this way, but that's, it works. That's what matters for now. But yeah, so you could say, okay, maybe there's something going on with like, this is happening, there's a check that's not happening or something inconsistently. So I'll put a breakpoint here, and I'll hit continue. So if I hit a breakpoint, now I just broke it. So if I swing again like this, and I hit a breakpoint, then I know something's happening there. So it looks like nothing's happening. So I'll do the same thing again. I click on it, and so this code is still happening. There isn't some special condition happening within here. It's not like this condition is different in those two situations. So if we keep going up the stack frame still, you can see that we have, in this case, a private function inside of the code for the actual melee weapon itself. So we've gone all the way up to the top of our kind of branching logic, where you start with the melee weapon has detected a thing that it can deal damage to, and it's basically saying, okay, I'm going to deal damage to this thing that I detected or whatever. And so this is where it's kind of, we're getting to like the root of our action that occurred. And as you can see here, melee attack creature is something that, let's see here, melee attack creature. Yeah, it's just kind of a helper function. This is the object itself, the self that's attacking target and the aim direction. And yeah, so it's again not doing anything special. If we step up a level, here we're doing, we're saying primary ray hit. So we're basically seeing if the ray cast hit. So at this point, I can be doing a check here, right? And I'll continue. And so if I swing, oops. Well, if I swing the sword again, here's the thing. I'm going to swing the sword. Here I hit a breakpoint. So here, I hit the breakpoint no matter what. So obviously this is where something is changing. So primary ray hit is, in this case, essentially primary ray hit is a variable which is, in this case, raycast hit 2D. So it's basically an object in Unity Engine that contains information about a raycast. So if you perform a raycast and the raycast hit nothing, then it's going to return a result which is basically nothing. It is essentially essentially it'll be like there is no collider, right? The collider value will be null or something, right? So this object structure, this data structure, essentially returns a value which you can reason as meaning that there was no hit, right? And that's where this implicit operator bool thing comes in, right? So take note of this, and we go back to how it's being used in the code. So that variable, which is a structure, is just being passed as kind of a condition to this if statement. So what C# does is it interprets this as a Boolean, because usually in if statements, the value that is inside the parentheses of an if statement is a Boolean. So it basically interprets it as a Boolean and performs like a cast on it to basically say, okay, was there a ray hit? So if there was a valid ray hit, this code will execute. If there wasn't, it'll just pass through. So if I hit continue, you can see this code never happened. So there was no ray hit. And if we, if we hit continue, you can see here, oops, that, well, there you go. Now if I hit E, I didn't swing my sword because I interacted. That action took precedence over the other. But now if I swing the sword again, you can see now, here we have actual results. This is like the centroid, as they call it, which I think is just the center of the thing, that the collision box, I'm guessing, the collider distance, whatever. It's filled with data, right? It's filled with all this data. Point, that's probably the point of the raycast. The normal of it, basically the direction pointing away from the surface of the ray that the ray hit, all that good stuff. And the actual hitbox itself, in this case, the collider that we hit. So we did get a valid hit. So this is ultimately where what I was talking about before. So if you didn't know what I meant, this is basically what I meant. I was looking for the place in the stack trace where something different was happening in the two different situations, right? There's the one situation, again, where when you swing the sword over the box, nothing happens as it should. But then if you click on it, then it starts happening. So what this is telling me is that in one situation it was detecting a ray hit, and in another situation it was not. So it's not that the issue is happening because the state of the damage receiver or the breakable object is being manipulated, right? It doesn't have that state, which it probably should. But it's not because the breakable object's state hypothetical state is being changed in some way. It's because the collider itself is being changed. So some of you have probably kind of figured out by now, without me having to go through this process, that it's probably something to do with the collision box. That it was ultimately the issue was just that there's a collision box that's being changed when you interact with the thing, right? Potentially. I don't know. So yeah, obviously this is, I clicked on the box. Now this code executes where, when you call this function, it's essentially calling all the way down back to the damage receiver and the breakable object, right? Eventually it gets down to this line, right? It's all part of the same stack frame, right? You have here on broken happens right here, And then all the way up here we have swing weapon. Yeah, swing weapon. So this is all part of the same kind of thread of execution of the same thread of function calls that occurred. So it was immediate in that sense. But yeah, so it happened here. But then if we swing the sword again, you can see the code does not happen. Obviously, just showing you again in case I was confusing and I didn't really make any sense. So because of this, we've now concluded that the thing that's not the same in both situations is, like I said, the collider. So I'm going to, well, I deleted the breakpoint. And so obviously, in the beginning of this video, you probably said, well, obviously check the thing that's, you know, executing when you interact, right? What is the code that's executing when you interact? That probably would have been the faster and smarter approach. I wanted to show my process of going through using breakpoint debugging to actually figure out like how, in this case, like what is the actual thing that's changing between these two situations. The situation where I, in this case, swing on the box. Let me get rid of all these breakpoints. When I swing my sword on the box and I get an item and you hear the break sound, and I swing the second time and nothing happens, right? Something has to be changing between those two situations, right? So in this case, you can actually see it here, actually. When I interact, the hitbox object actually lights up, and if I break it, it goes off. That's kind of weird. I mean, if you do this, why is it enabling the hitbox to begin with? What's going on there, right? In either case, if it's on, right, you can just walk through it. If I break it, you can still walk through it. So it almost doesn't matter. It's almost like, why is it doing that? And if we look at, say, for example, the interactor here, you can see, well, so the interactor, again, is the thing which actually handles, you know, what happens when you click on a box, in this case, or click on the chest. And it's doing three things. You probably saw this before. You probably noticed this and were like, oh, you know, don't you see, obviously, that the weird thing that's happening here? And I did too, but I assumed that it was intended, right? Maybe that was the wrong mindset, but my mindset is, you know, like, if you look at something and be like, oh, that could be the issue, but maybe there's a reason it's like this. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. It's like, why would you want to make the hitbox active there? But I don't know what the person who put this here was intending. There's no way. I mean, there's no way to even leave a comment on this, and that's where comments come into play in coding and programming, is leaving little notes for people before you if you're writing something that's confusing. Really, your code shouldn't be confusing. Your code should be clear in what in how it's written and what the intention is of the code and what its purpose is, what it's trying to do. That should be perfectly clear. But sometimes there's edge cases, there's situations where that isn't always possible. So in this case, this is the culprit, right? You could also say that setting the damage receiver to enabled is also kind of weird. Like, why are we setting the damage receiver to enabled? But again, it's that same mindset of like, I have no idea, right? But again, like we could look at, say, you know, well, I don't know if there actually, I don't know if there was something else I wanted to look at here, but you know, uh, I would say definitely that I should just disable this because ultimately, like, the hitbox doesn't need to be active, and when you break in this case, when you, for the breakable object, when you break it, you are disabling, because of this, you are disabling the hitbox and the collision, which is this thing. But you're enabling the hitbox for some reason. And what else? This is what I meant. Yeah. Fade FX, which I'm trying to remember what that's about. I think I know what that's about, but that was another thing that's being disabled as well. But then for some reason, the damage receiver is being re-enabled, I guess. Even though it's not even being disabled in this situation to begin with. It's very strange. It could be a leftover. It could be something that's left over from a different situation where you interact with something and you want the hitbox to be enabled. But of course, if we just disable this checkbox, you can see that fixes the issue. Obviously, you can still do this weird interaction thing, which you probably should be able to do, but yeah. So in reality, that's pretty much it. I think I'm also going to fix another issue here, or at least add some code here, just to kind of prepare for future situations where the chests, or I should say breakable objects, should have some information stating like, hey, I can be broken or something like that. But yeah, that's the debugging process. Let's see here. Open up the treasure chest for the dungeon. So in this case, the damage receiver is actually disabled in this situation, which is a bit strange. Is this the correct? It should be. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's disabled too. A lot of weird things going on here. But yeah, you can see like this shouldn't be here. And I also don't know why we are enabling the damage receiver. I don't know why. It could be because of the fact that I think what it could be is that the intention was that you would only enable the hitbox after you've tried to interact with it. I think that's the issue. That someone was originally trying to fix with at least with this chest, because if I look at, say, for example, let me try to open up the other chest. So this is the regular chest. And actually, this chest has the same kind of situation where you can, how should I say, you can still enable it. You can, or when you interact with it, you can still do this. But obviously, like, there's two different things that can happen with a gold chest, whereas with a regular chest, there's only one thing that can happen when you interact with it. So that is something that, like, has to be accounted for with, like, in this case, it's like they're enabling this, I think, expressly for the purpose of making it so that you can't break a chest until you've opened it or something. I don't know. I'm honestly not sure. But I think I'm going to leave the video off there. I could just show you me writing the code, but honestly, like, I don't want this video to get too long, and most of it's just me talking anyway. And I don't want it to just get too stretched out with like coding and stuff like that. I just do these videos in one take. But yeah, what I might end up doing is for the breakable objects, I might have some extra state, you know, some variable for like, has this thing been broken? So that when you try to break that object, or basically some sort of like I just said, so if the broken function ever tries to get called, basically the code will not execute if it's already broken. It's not going to do the same thing twice, because right now you could have that function can be called externally because it's public. That unbroken can be called multiple times, which in reality it shouldn't be. It should only be called once when it's not broken, and then when it's broken, you never call it ever again. That's how it should work. So yeah, or at least that's the kind of the immediate logical way to think about it. But yeah, so that's where I want to leave this video off. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my rambling. See you guys later.